Good morning and welcome to the pre-bid conference for ITB 27 FY23 Charter Bus Services. My name is David Webb and I am the Procurement Director for Arlington Public Schools. During the conference, I will be reviewing the ITB and highlighting those areas which are considered to be of interest. Also representing APS during the conference are Carolina Soto, the Procurement Specialist who will be responsible for managing any contract or contracts awarded as a result of this ITB, and Debbie DeFranco, Supervisor for Health and PE, who will be the main customer of any contract or contracts awarded as a result of this ITB. It needs to be emphasized that it is the bidder's responsibility to be both familiar with the content of the ITB and to be fully aware of the information they are required to provide if submitting a bid in response to this ITB. Questions are welcome during the conference and will need to be submitted in writing through the Q&A capability. Questions will be addressed at the end of the conference. And now I will start the review of the ITB. ITB 27 FY23 is for the provision of charter bus services for Arlington Public Schools. Highlighted throughout this ITB are areas that I consider, or APS considers to be of importance. But again, as I mentioned earlier, it still remains the bidder's responsibility to be familiar with the content and their responsibilities. The bid closing date and time is January the 23rd. Bids to be submitted no later than 11:59 p.m. and then the bid opening will occur on January the 24th at 10 a.m. Bids shall not be received at the Syfax Education Centre by mail, express mail or in person, and they will be received electronically through a secure cloud-based file sharing platform, which I'll go into more detail later on. Bidders wishing to submit a bid in response to the ITB are required to upload the mandatory requirements found in the instructions to bidders into the platform through the link found on the current solicitations webpage, which can be located by accessing Arlington Public Schools Procurement Office website. For a bid to be considered for award of a contract, the bid must be received in the platform by no later than 11:59 p.m. on Monday, January the 23rd. Bids received after the bid closing date shall not be considered. Confirmation is not provided that a bid has been received in the platform. However, bidders can contact Carolina Soto at the email address and the telephone number or the telephone number provided to request confirmation that its bid has been received. Bids shall not be opened and announced in the Syfax Education Centre, but will be done so remotely at 10 a.m. on Tuesday, January 24th. Using Microsoft Teams, anyone wishing to review the bid opening can also find the link in the Microsoft Teams invite under the due date column of the current solicitations table on the Procurement Office website, found under the link to bid opening ITB 27 FY23. Minutes of the conference, including but not limited to questions and answers presented at the conference, will be issued in writing by the Procurement Office as an information item and distributed in the same manner as an addendum as set forth below. Term of the contract. The initial term of the contract will be for a period of 12 months following the execution of the contract, and APS at its sole discretion has the right, but is under no obligation, to exercise this right to renew not to exceed 4 renewal contract terms at the same terms and conditions. And moving on to the instructions to bidders. There are mandatory provisions in the ITB and they're indicated by the inclusion of the word shall or must. Failure to comply with these requirements or with any other requirements stated as mandatory either in this invitation or the instructions to bidders or the bid form or any addenda shall result in rejection of the bid as being non-responsive. Bidders' questions. All questions regarding this solicitation, other than those submitted at the conference, must be submitted in writing via email addressed to Carolina Sorto, Procurement Specialist, at the email address provided, and Debbie DeFranco at the email address provided there as well, and must be received by 5 p.m. On Wednesday, January 11th, 2023. The Procurement Office will issue written answers to all questions timely submitted. If a conference is conducted, the Procurement Office will issue written answers to all questions raised at the conference as an information item. The information item should be posted on the APS website and should also be posted on Virginia's online electronic procurement system known as EVA. It is the responsibility of each bidder to access this information. Addenda. All addenda shall be posted on the APS website and shall be posted on EVA. It's the responsibility of each bidder to access this information. The ITB shall only be amended if there is an addenda issued. Information item, as mentioned before, will also be posted on EVA and also on the Arlington Public Schools procurement website. Submission of bids. For a bid to be considered for award of a contract, the bid must be received in the platform by no later than 11:59 p.m. on Monday, January the 23rd, known as the bid closing. Bids received after the bid closing shall not be considered. Confirmation is not provided that a bid has been received at the platform. However, bidders can contact Carolina Sorto at the email address or the telephone number provided to request confirmation that his bid has been received. It is mandatory that everything in the bid form is completed. All pages of the bid form must be submitted and all blanks in the bid form must be completed or noted as not applicable. Notation of not applicable or NA shall be used only if the information requested is not required or mandatory element of the bid. A person authorized to bind the bidder in contractual matters must sign the bid form. Just bringing to bidders' attention the need for a certification regarding criminal convictions. This form is provided later on in the documentation, but this is a requirement that needs to be completed and submitted with the bid. Just to re-emphasize that again, the contractor shall submit to the owner a completed contractor certification regarding criminal convictions on the form provided at Appendix 1 as a mandatory attachment to its bid. Moving on to 26, minimum qualifications of bidders. Bidders must have a minimum of 10 years continuous experience prior to bid closing in the management and operation of a business engaged in providing the work and currently engaged in providing the work to a commercial or public body accounts under contract. Bidders must provide with their bid a list of 3 commercial or public body references for work of a similar nature performed under a term contract, which clearly demonstrates the bidder's ability to successfully perform under any resulting contract. References must be within the last 3 years preceding bid closing. Please verify the names, addresses, phone numbers, and email addresses prior to submitting them as references. Mandatory requirements. The following are Class 1 mandatory requirements which must accompany your bid. Failure to provide any of the following Class 1 mandatory requirements with your bid will result in the bid being considered non-responsive and not being considered for contract award. A completed bid form. If the bidder is a joint venture, a copy of the written joint venture agreement. If the bidder is a partnership, a copy of the written partnership agreement. A completed Appendix 1, contractor certification regarding criminal convictions. The following are Class 2 mandatory requirements which should accompany your bid. If admitted, the bidder may be given the opportunities to supplement its bid in accordance with restrictions set forth below. As a Class 2 mandatory requirement, a completed Appendix 2 insurance coverage checklist evidencing the required insurance coverages set forth in the terms and conditions. If a Class 2 mandatory requirement is not provided with the bid of the apparent low bidder, the apparent low bidder will be notified by the Procurement Office that the omitted Class 2 mandatory requirements must be received by the Procurement Office by no later than 5 p.m. on the 5th business day following the notice to provide the information. Failure of the apparent low bidder to provide the omitted Class 2 mandatory requirements within the stated timeframe will result in the bid from the apparent low bidder being considered non-responsive and no longer considered for contract award. So it is recommended that bidders provide all the information of the Class 1 and Class 2 with its bid, but if it doesn't provide the Class 2 mandatory requirements, the Procurement Office will reach out to the apparent low bidder or bidders and request the missing information. Moving on to number 30, contractor selection and award of individual trips. Bidders are not required to submit prices with its bid. Instead, APS will request those bidders offered a contract to price trips on a trip-by-trip basis. However, APS may award a trip to any selected contractor. It is the intent of APS to allocate trips in an approximately equal rotation among all contractors. Selection of the contractor for award of a trip will, however, be based on the following criteria as applicable to a trip. A, the type of trip being performed. B, evaluation of past and current performance on a trip, responsiveness, performance capabilities. C, balancing of trips dollar volume among contractors. D, price as it relates to APS's independent cost estimate or offer from other contractor. E, other appropriate criteria as deemed in the best interest of APS, including seeking competition between as many of the contractors APS in its sole discretion considers to be necessary who were awarded a contract in response to this ITB. So just to re-emphasize that bidders are not required to submit pricing with its bid, and instead APS will request those bidders offered a contract to price trips on a trip-by-trip basis. And with that, I'll pass it over to Debbie DeFranco to give a summary of the requirements.
Good morning. Once again, I am Debbie DeFranco, Supervisor of Health, Physical, Driver Education, and Athletics for Arlington Public Schools, and I will be one of the primary users of this contract. The contracts will be primarily used for athletic and activities at the secondary level, mostly at our high schools, and they will be scheduled through our student activities and athletics offices. So those individuals will be communicating directly with the vendor. Again, most of these trips are for athletic events, and they will be categorized in two different categories. Primary services are those trips under 50 miles, and they sometimes can fall in a short window of 4 hours where there will be shuttling between the school and different locations within Northern Virginia area. The second would be all of those other trips that might fall outside of 50 miles, might include overnight trips, especially when our teams and programs go to competitions that are beyond the 50 miles and sometimes require an overnight stay. The primary trips, again, are mostly 4-hour blocks or windows where they'll be shuttling the student athletes or performers back and forth to different schools within Northern Virginia. Again, they're either athletic or fine arts. The schedule will be provided in advance as much as possible, usually at least 2 weeks, but sometimes they might give you a whole season of the trips that are necessary. And there are going to be those rare times when a team does fall into a situation where they'll need services within a 24-hour notice. So if they win in an event, say today, and then that puts them playing tomorrow, and sometimes it's just contingent on the win or loss. And so that's a short-term reservation. Most of the trips are within the Northern Virginia area. There are going to be some times where they'll travel outside of Northern Virginia to other locations across the state, and occasionally there'll be some trips outside of the state. And again, those will give you as much advance notice as possible. I believe that's mostly the extent of the services that we're looking for in this contract. Again, there are two types: primary, which is under 50 miles, and then the secondary, which is over 50 miles, and again, could also include overnight stays. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Debbie. I would just like to just re-emphasize one point there, is that APS is looking to award as many contracts as it feels is necessary to meet its requirement. So we're not necessarily looking just to have one contractor. We are looking to have a number of contractors that we can look, we can turn to for this requirement. So thank you for that. Moving on to the bid form. This is a form that bidders are required to complete and submit. Just running through it again, the bid closing date and time we've discussed previously, January 23rd, no later than 11:59 p.m. The bid opening will be the next day on the 24th at 10 a.m. Full legal name of the bidder and all the information there that's required. To acknowledge receipt of addenda, the bidders can either complete this field here or can submit a copy of the addenda with their bid. So there's two options to do it. Check which of the following categories are applicable to the bidder. References, as previously mentioned, we're looking for 3 commercial public body references. Provide the information in here. Type of business, again, we're looking to the bidder to check which of the following apply. State Corporation Commission identification number. The bidder should either have a SCC or be exempt. Either way, you need to have information to support whichever one of the boxes they check. Debarment status, complete the fields that are applicable to that. The criminal conviction certificate compliance, as previously mentioned, there's a form to complete that we'll come to later on that needs to be submitted with this bid. Number of years in business, this again is one of the mandatory requirements for experience, so we're looking for that information. As previously mentioned, the mandatory requirements, they need to provide with the bid the completed bid form, evidence of a joint venture or partnership, the completed Appendix 1 contractor certification regarding criminal convictions. Class 2 mandatory requirements can be provided either with the bid, or APS will ask for that information at a later date to the apparent low bidder. Bidders to provide either to check A or B to confirm which it's done. Pricing schedule, as previously discussed, prices are not required with the bid. The trips will be priced on a trip-by-trip basis. Again, just on the bid evaluation formula, just to re-emphasize the fact that prices are not required to be submitted with a bid. It needs to be signed by somebody who has the authority to enter into a contract, the name and also the title of the individual. Next is the agreement. This is the form that will be completed and signed by APS to enter into a contract with those bidders that are deemed to be responsive and responsible. Moving through that. Pricing schedule, as again, no need for that information. That will be done on a trip-by-trip basis. Terms and conditions. These are approved by the APS attorney and are not subject to negotiation. If bidders have any observations or questions about this, they can submit a question to Carolina or to Debbie for APS to consider. I do wish to just to emphasize one particular part, and that is the insurance requirements, which is found on 42. So bidders submitting submitting a bid in response to the ITB are required to have the insurance that's detailed under section 42 of the terms and conditions. There is a checklist that I will address later on that the bidder is required to complete and submit with its bid. But again, just bringing to your attention the insurance requirements of APS. Any questions on this can be submitted in a form through an email to Carolina or to Debbie if you wish consideration to be given to reviewing this. Moving through the document now. There's the sample purchase order. This just gives you an example of the template that APS uses for its purchase orders. So if the contract's awarded, trip takes place, was going to take place, then this is the documentation that you'll receive in advance. Moving on through that. Screenshots for the steps required to submit a bid. As previously mentioned, bids are uploaded into the platform, and this gives a detailed step-by-step explanation, instructions on how to do that. Criminal conviction form, as previously mentioned, so this form here is a mandatory requirement and needs to be submitted with the bidder's bid. Insurance coverage checklist, and as previously mentioned, this mirrors then the language that we previously discussed in the in the terms and conditions. And just moving through it, identifies what the coverage requirements are, and then at the end, the insurance agent needs to sign that, date it, and so does the bidder as well. The trip evaluation form. This is a form that's going to be completed following each trip. And then this is a form that will be used by the likes of Debbie to reserve the contractor services. And I think now we've concluded the review of the ITB. And if there are any questions, I don't see any in the Q&A. Have any questions been received?
No, I don't see anything.
Nothing? All right. All right. Well, in that case, then we'll conclude the pre-bid conference, and I'd like to thank everybody for their attendance. I look forward to receiving bids in response to the ITB 27 FY23. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.